guys, my name is Manuel, and today I want to talk to you about the number one way for you to learn, for example, a language like Spanish. If you want to learn any other language, this also applies. Now, the number one thing you should definitely focus on is actually speaking the language, right? So, the problem with the more traditional ways of learning, such as the ones we learn in school, is that you learn the words written in the paper. So right there is a distraction because you're visualizing the word, and that gets away from the actual pronunciation. And even worse than that is actually the grammar. So I've found many times that I've got Spanish friends. I was born in Spain. Um, I grew up there until I was 10, right? And anyway, being in London right now, this is where I am. I still meet people from Spain and they come over here and they've studied English before, but they're not quite good, and they try to say something and they realize that they keep trying to think about the order of things, right? And the problem is that they're thinking about the grammar. They don't have it such a way that the way I'm speaking right now just comes out automatically. The only way that can happen is if you actually say the words and you practice them again and again. Because the way the brain works, we build patterns, right? You can't carry on thinking about every single thing you do, right? That takes too much energy. Like anything you do in life, for example, you wake up in the morning, you when you walk, you don't think about left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. No, what happened is that when you were a kid, you tried and failed and tried and failed, right? And then eventually your brain caught on to actually the right way to walk. Whereas to the point that now, right now you don't have to think about it. It's the same thing with language. When you're trying to say a sentence, right? For it to come out fluently, you need to have said it many other times in the past. The best way to do that is by actually starting from the beginning, trying to say that. I'll give you an example, right? If I'm trying to learn how to say I'm going home, right? Say I work with Spanish people, and I had to tell myself I'm going to learn how to speak Spanish. I know nothing, and I asked one of my colleagues, "How do you say I'm going home?" And they say, "Me voy a casa." Okay, me voy a casa. Okay. So you say the first time right because it's fresh in your memory. 5 minutes later, what you should do straight away, try and use that, because that's what's going to happen is that you're going to make a mistake somewhere. Now, if you're good friends with the person, you should ask them, "Did I say anything wrong?" And they'll correct your pronunciation, and that's how you're gonna get the accents slowly. Now, think about the traditional way of learning. If you were to say, "I'd love to learn Spanish," let me ask my colleague, or even worse, because that's actually the more ideal way that I'm actually speaking about. Even worse, the traditional way would be in a classroom, and you say, "How do you say I'm going home?" And they write in paper, "Me voy a casa." What's going to happen there is that you're going to read it, you're going to be fluent at writing the thing, and you're not going to be able to remember it because you've never practiced it, right? So if you're at work after you've learned it in school and you're thinking, "Oh, I would love to say something in Spanish. Oh, let me what was that sentence? That sentence I wrote down. Oh man, I can't remember. Man, it's hard." Now, another thing that happens is that if you're focusing grammar and you, for example, you remember the infinitive for "I'm going," and if you want to say "I'm going home" to your colleague, now you're gonna start trying to like put the sentence together in a way that doesn't even make sense. Like, you guys need to understand that grammar is actually very advanced when it comes to language, within the concept of language, right? So if let's talk about sports, for example, right? If right at the beginning when people were having races in, I don't know, the swimming pool, whatever, people would just swim, right? They would just swim. The next level to that was actually breaking down the arm movement, the breathing, the equipment, right? What you would wear in your head to make you more um, dynamic through the water. All those things, breaking it down is actually another level to it, right? So you need to notice this. Speaking is the most basic way of learning a language. Grammar comes after, right? Anything is in this way. Like, you want to do the thing several times until it becomes automatic. Because guess what? There's too many things going on. If you try to do everything at the same time, it's gonna take too long, and we're going to get discouraged. That's what's going to happen. I remember when I first came from Spain, I used to live in Valencia, and I moved to London when I was 10. And in Spain, when you're 8 or so, you start learning some English. So you learn like the basic like, numbers, or at least you definitely you're going to remember how to say hello, how are you, all those very basic things, right? So I was like, okay, I don't know English, but I know some basics, right? So when they're my first day in school, primary school, I'm in the playground and I start hearing all these people speaking to me, right? And I'm like, okay, come on, I know some English, I know something, right? And I'm like, man, I can't understand anything. Like, I'm not even a single word, and I know some basic stuff. Like, and then it wasn't until one girl actually slowed it down and said, "How are you?" Which is basically, she basically said it the way you would say it in like an audio tape or whatever. And I was like, oh, fine. See, I knew how to I could respond to it, but my ear wasn't actually used to it. Which brings me to the second point. If you want to get better at listening, you need to practice listening. You're not going to get better at listening by reading a lot. By You could be the best. Like you could actually understand so much when you read. Like I met like this girl. I met her in university when I was doing engineering and everything, and she was actually really good at English. Like she actually knew so many words, but if you spoke to her, she couldn't understand what you were saying because she wasn't used to listening to the word itself, right? Or her pronunciation might be off because she wasn't used to actually hearing the word. Another misleading thing, right, when it comes to actually learning the language, if you're learning it based on how the word is written, primarily, and then trying to say it, you're going to get misled. And you might be able to go around that eventually, but you're initially going to be misled by the pronunciation from your native language. So, for example, if and we all know that a certain word is going to be said a different way to the way it's actually written depending on the language. So this girl, she would know a lot of words, but then she would say them wrong, which meant that she wasn't understood. But that was okay because as soon as she started practicing it, then she was able to actually get a pronunciation better, right? Because she would get corrected. But then she wasn't able to understand the person because the way she thought would be pronounced is completely different to the way it was actually pronounced. And the way she thought would be pronounced was based on her first language, which was Spanish. She would be reading something. She would know lots of words in Spanish, right? In English, sorry. But she would be looking at it and she would basically be making her own pronunciation up. That's what happens, right? Even when you're trying to learn Spanish from English, you might be looking at a word and you're not familiar with the sounds, right? If you're just looking at the way it's written. So you're going to, without you realizing, you're basically making up your own language or your own dialect because you're using the same language, but you're changing the actual pronunciation and the accent and everything else. So what happens is that you actually try to use the word, you get discouraged because you don't understand what they're saying, they don't understand what you're saying. Anyway, short story made shorter or longer. Practice speaking first. Try practice speaking first. I wouldn't even put that much importance in writing. I'll be honest. Like when I first was learning German in school, I hated it. I'll be honest. I totally hated it. But then once I started figuring this out, the fact that you should learn to speak first, I learned German, French, a bunch of different languages, and I noticed that at least for the first month, you shouldn't even focus on how it's written. If anything, you should write it the way you think should, like, the right way to actually say it. Don't You don't have to. I mean, if you're good enough at actually reading within the language, then go for it. Write it straight away as it is, right? But if you're getting confused, if the actual writing is preventing you from saying the word properly, write it phonetically. Just write it the way you actually supposed to say it, because at the end of the day, that's going to help you say it sooner. The more times you say it in real life, the faster that's going to stick in your brain. The more times you say it in combination with other words, the less thinking time you're going to need, right? So if I say I'm going home, I'm going home, I'm going home, all of a sudden someone's going to be like, oh, so what are you doing? I'm going home, right? I don't have to think, I'm going, okay, that's the right grammar, okay. Home, yeah. House, home. Yeah, you don't need all that if you practice it properly and often. It's all about repetition. Remember, at the beginning, you're gonna fail with anything. You're gonna fail. You're not gonna know what you're doing. Same thing with language. you're going to say it wrong. Put yourself out there and say it wrong so that it sticks in your brain and you're actually able to say it fluently. Okay. So good luck, guys, with learning Spanish or whatever language you're trying to learn, and see you later.